Hi everyone, my name is Vili and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity. Our guest today is Fawn Germer, who is the four-time Pulitzer Prize nominee, best-selling author of 9 books, including an Oprah book, and one of the 3 women speakers in the top 15 keynote speakers on the prestigious Global Guru list. She was the keynote speaker at the Association Forum's Women Executive Forum in March this year. I was in awe in the audience and I keep telling myself I have to invite her to one of my podcasts, and here we are today. Welcome to Humans of Authenticity, Fawn. Would you like to introduce yourself to our
Thank you.
listeners first?
Well, that talks about the personal stuff. I think that I've always been someone who, being authentic, is more concerned about the balance, and the personal is definitely just as important as the professional. So I would say that, when they're getting ready to write my obituary, they would probably say, Fawn Germer was a great partner, a great friend, a good daughter, passionate kayaker, swam laps every day, cycled all over the world, and also was a best-selling author and journalist. So it's kind of like the tagline is what I did, and who I am is really somebody who tries to live what you're talking about, a very authentic life. I just had a conversation with somebody today who's very senior business professional, and we were talking about some other people who they're all intense about talking about leadership and business, and they're at the same point in their career as I am, except I said to this person, I don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. And she goes, yeah, we went beyond that. And that's kind of where I am, is at a point where I want to just live a great life. I don't feel like I have to prove things anymore. I'm still working and doing what I love because I love it. I've got my 10th book. I've finished it, and not because I need to put out another book, but because I wanted to do it. And I love speaking and I want to keep speaking, but I don't mesh well with a lot of what I see on, well, especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn gives me a sick stomach because I think a lot of people are on that posing that they're doing important things and thinking important thoughts. And at this point, I just think, oh, bull, right? So that's who I am.
That's really cool. I really resonate with one of your point about LinkedIn and content on social media in general, because it got to a point when I start seeing performative content rather than true content from the content creator. But then having said that, I think that's what set some sort of content like yours with any others who are performative. Because if you're performing it, people will see it and they'll call you out, especially on open platform like social media.
Yeah, but you know something? I had an interesting experience last summer, as you know, because you heard my keynote. But last summer, I took the summer off and I got a van and I traveled cross country with my dog and then up into Canada. So it was an amazing thing. And I really wanted to do some serious cycling because I used to be a very serious cyclist when I lived out west in Colorado. And I would do endurance cycling. And it was really important to me to still be able to do some of what I did, not certainly at the level. I mean, I was ridiculous when I was younger and once did 230 miles over 7 mountain passes, 23,000 feet of climbing in one day. Most people won't consider driving that in one day, and I did it on my bike.
Oh.
But I wanted to know that I could climb passes, that I was still strong. And my big goal for the summer was to do the Going to the Sun Road, which is a very famous road, beautiful road in Glacier National Park. And it was one of the passes I had never done when I was out there that I always wanted to do. And so I trained for it. And when I got to Montana, people there were saying, don't do that. It's a very unsafe road. It's very narrow. I mean, they don't let RVs over a certain height and width on that road, or length even. And yet people sneak on with that. And there is barely enough space on that road for one car, much less two. But there are going to be 2 cars and a bike. And everybody that lived there was saying, don't do that. There is a week when you can come back and do it in the spring after they've taken the snow off. And the only people who can go on that road are cyclists. That's when you do that. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be here then. And I'm not going to fly out with my bike. That will cost a fortune to just do what I'm already here to do. And I had trained for it. And the night before I was going to ride, and I was going to leave at 5:30 in the morning, I decided to drive it with my van and see what it really was. And I get on this drive and I'm like, I could do this. And as I'm going, I'm realizing how terrifyingly narrow this road is. I mean, it's so narrow, but I'm leaving early and I'm thinking, I can do this. I want to do this. And then as I'm driving around one bend, some man had walked for some reason up. I'd taken a pull off and then walked up the road to get a picture of a waterfall. And somebody was coming in the opposite direction at the same time that I was passing him. And there was, maybe 3 inches between me and that man. And I thought, you dumb jerk, to him, like, why would you do that? And then it occurred to me that where he was walking is where my bike would be the next day. And
Wow.
that it was that tight and that it was unsafe. So then I started to think, would I do this if I could tell no one that I did it? Okay. So it's like when you talk about the performative stuff, all of us, we like to do big things and tell people. So, I don't really brag about my career stuff, but I mean, here's a magazine article right here. And look, there I am in my kayak at sunrise. I mean,
So cool.
we do chronicle our lives fairly well. And so I thought, if I could tell no one that I did this, would it still be that important to me to do it? And the answer was yes. But there aren't very many things that you really take the time to say that, because you're just doing it and you're posting it, and we're performing our lives every day, all day. So I thought, yes, I would still do it. But then I started to think about something else, which was that I had had a really serious cycling accident that gave me a head injury. Didn't physically tear my body apart, but 2 years ago, it gave me such a memory problem that they thought that I either had early onset Alzheimer's or dementia. And for someone whose mom had Alzheimer's, that is not a good thing to hear. And that gets into my coping thing. So ask me about that later. That was a really big lesson there. But when I started to think about being there and the potential of getting in another accident being that real, and I realized it was that real, I decided not to do it. I said, I'm going to go hike tomorrow. That was a really big learning experience for me, because odds were, and I knew the odds were I'd be okay, but it doesn't always mean that I'm okay. There's no 100%. So I decided not to do it. And interestingly, the next week, there was an article that I read that a car had gone over the side of that road and they had to get cranes to lift the people out. So it is that narrow and that treacherous. And I write about it in my book about how we do put on a show. And when we make decisions on what we're going to do, we have to say, why are we doing it? And I photograph everything because I love photography. But I don't always have to share the story. And that gets into the big why of when we're doing things in life. We really have to know what our motives are. And I'm all for risk. I take risks. I was kayaking in the dark this morning, right? I mean, I'm all for risks. But if it's a stupid risk, you got to think twice.
Sure. You raise a very big question, the big why. Have you got your response to that big question for yourself?
The why I do what I do, I, I think it's because my mom had a terrible stroke and was paralyzed when she was 66.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And she was sick for 22 years. So 10 years into that, she got Alzheimer's. And so she suffered. But I saw her the day before that stroke. I was living in Colorado. I was home in Florida. She was fine. We went to the beach. We went to a movie. We went to a restaurant. And then a day later, I never saw that mom again. I saw one that I loved and adored and learned from. My mom taught me everything through her illness. But what I learned by the timing of it was that life is so unpredictable. you can't wait to do what you need to do with your life. I am never one to put off or wait, but that has become more imperative in the last year because I had a lot of friends get sick and die unexpectedly in the last year. Ages 58, the oldest was 70, so it was like 58, 59, 63, 64, 67, 68, and I think there was another 63. I think two of them were 60, and the 70-year-old. 8 people.
Yeah.
None of them knew they were going to die. They just got sick, and these were not cancer patients. These are people who had weird things happen and they died. Heart, respiratory, unexplained. And that made me realize that you don't waste a minute, from now on, because these were people that, I was, 63 now, and I'm not wasting a minute, not 1 minute.
That's inspirational. I'm also hearing a lot of gratefulness in the story that you just shared, and that turned into a sense of immersing yourself in every single things that you do.
Yeah, what a great insight you got there. I was just swimming my laps at the Y. You can see my goggle marks here. Sorry, that's why I'm wearing my glasses, right? I thought,
That's
let's just cover
okay.
that up. And I was swimming because last night I got on a Zoom call with a bunch of senior executive women, very, very senior women. We've been friends for a long time. And two of them, well, one is really sick with cancer and has been going to radiation 5 days a week for several weeks now, and is living at a university not in her town, so she gets the best treatment. The other one, her husband, has very serious prostate cancer, probably not going to get cured, and her mother-in-law, she's taking care of her, and she's 97 and has dementia, and then she has a son that has severe developmental issues. And listening to them, I said to the group that we all need to have a moment of really realizing how blessed we are when we don't have something like that to report. When, I get this and that ache or pain in my knee or whatever, but basically when I go to the doctor's office and they have that list that you fill out when you're a new patient, and it's like, no, 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 because right now, today, everything is fine. And we have to be really grateful about that. It doesn't matter how old you are. You have to have such gratitude for your health and your freedom. So today, like I said, I got up, I did the full moon set kayaking followed by the sunrise, came back. My dog, who's down there snoring behind me, he demanded as soon as I got home that he go for a hike in the woods like he does every day. The minute, he wouldn't let me sit down. So I get done with that, and I knew I was going to see you. So I had to run and go to the Y and do my laps. And in the water, that was when I felt the kind of gratitude I would hope that everybody who listens to you and your wonderful show will feel. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so strong. I'm swimming great. This water feels so good. Thank you, God, for letting me be healthy enough to enjoy this. Because most people are in the pool, and what are they thinking when they're swimming? They're thinking 21, 21, 21,
Mm.
22, 22, 22. They're just counting their laps, but they're not feeling the gift of being able to do that. And I'm very aware of the privilege of health and the privilege of time.
Mm.
That I have a little more time than most people because I'm an author and a speaker. And if I want to work at night, I work at night. I don't have to do it when I'm speaking. I have to be somewhere at a certain time. But other than that, I have a lot of control. So
Yeah.
it's real gratitude for life.
Thank you for those powerful words. I do want to jump into the keyword discussion now because you sort of allude to it. So
Yeah.
which word do you want to discuss with us today?
Coping.
And why coping?
Because I want everybody who hears this to leave this and tell themselves, I have the ability to cope with anything.
Mm.
Because you got people who are some of the biggest wimps, right? I mean, sometimes it's just, like, people complain about things that haven't even happened. And my mother was paralyzed for 22 years and then got Alzheimer's and never complained once, not once. And that's because she always told us, face life. She said, face life from what time we were little kids. And I always thought, well, when I got older, I was like, what do you know about facing life? You live this comfortable suburban existence. And then when the chips fell, when she got sick, she was a freaking rock star. Now, as the daughter of someone with Alzheimer's, I had to learn to cope too, because you see this person that you love more than anyone in the world, and they're they're leaving you more and more. And I came up with a mantra, and it's 3 words: accept, cope, adapt. But all of that really is about how to cope. Because the sooner I could accept what was going on with my mom, cope with it, and then adapt to the change, I could enjoy the woman that I still had instead of regretting all of the change that was happening. So, when somebody starts to get Alzheimer's, they repeat themselves 100 times, the same story over and over and over. But I knew a day was going to come when I wouldn't even be able to hear her voice. So I just would listen to her and love the sound of her voice. Well, then when the words became few, I was so grateful she could still say, I love you. And then when she couldn't say anything and she would just lay there, I would feel how warm her skin was. And I would smell the scent that was distinctly my mother. And I cherished that she was still alive. I was praying that God would be merciful and not make her suffer too long. She suffered a long time. But I would see women out for lunch with their moms or shopping or taking vacations. And I would think, boy, wouldn't that be nice? But I can guarantee you that because of the experience with my mother's illness, I had a far more intimate relationship with my mom than I would say almost anybody I've ever known, because it was only about love. It was only about appreciating what I had. And when all you've got is love, when your life is reduced to that, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So love is the only thing that matters and the only thing that lasts. So I went through this huge thing, and it was accept, cope, adapt. So then, she had to eventually go into a nursing home, which was, my gosh, that was trauma, seeing that. I never wanted that for my mother. But I just said accept, cope, adapt, because my brother was doing that. He said, you got to adapt. And the minute I did, I had my mom. And so this could be a really depressing story, right? You got this woman who was sick for 22 years, but I had the best mom in the world. And every day of that 22 years, I felt loved. And I did wonder, I thought, well, I wonder if when she dies, if the grieving's going to be easier, because I've been losing bits of her the whole time. And it wasn't any easier. It was my mother. And I thank God that I had the mom I did, who taught me so much when she was sick. So she taught me how to cope. So I think I brought that up when I was telling that story about the cycling accident, and that they said that I might have dementia or Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Now, I do not want that. I mean, I had to come up with a plan quite quickly, but I also knew that while this was unanswered and unsettled, I needed to find a way to accept, cope, and adapt. And I mean, I've got those words are right in front of me on the TV in my office: accept, cope, adapt. And that's how I deal with everything. And so how was I going to do this if I was this young and diagnosed with Alzheimer's and facing what my mom had? And I knew it was going to be a couple of months before they did all the testing. And the big test was about 2 months. So what I did to cope was I loaded a kayak on the roof of my car. And every week I went up to Crystal River, Florida, and I went swimming with the manatees. And let me tell you, if a baby manatee is going to swim around and kiss your face, you're not going to have a bad week. And it was like these manatees just gave me so much love. They got me through it. And Every week I went there. I looked forward to when I was going. I'd come back with beautiful pictures and a beautiful story, and I'd make videos and post them. And it turned out I did not have it, right? But it took a long time to find that out. And then my memory came back.
Hmm.
But, it was a really bad moment in my life. And I didn't waste any of it. Because the other thing that is having watched somebody who's had that is if you're having a good day today, you better enjoy it because things can change rather drastically. So I'm all about telling people to learn to cope. Tell themselves, I can cope with this. Because we all know people who are worry warts. All they do is worry, 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 and they are controlled by that, and they want to talk about it endlessly. And what that does is deplete them of the moment that they've got right now, which probably is livable.
Thank you so much for that. There's so much I love in what you've just shared.
Oh,
So if it's okay, I'd just like to unpack some of that. First of all, I
sure.
really love how you described your relationship with your mother. I live half a globe away from my mom, so I got to see her once every year.
Oh boy.
Um, but what I'm
Where is she?
hearing,
Where is she?
she's in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, wow.
Only
That's
in
pretty
Seattle.
far away, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, like 20, 30 hours flight.
Yeah, right. That's a
But I get to
different
see her
day.
every year.
You couldn't pick a different time zone. You had to pick a different day zone.
Correct. But what I admire from how you describe your relationship is how intimate it is. And it's taught me about the quality of our time spending together. Say we go into the office 8 hours a day, but if we don't even bother talking to the people in the next office to us, all of those time doesn't really count because there is no interactions between the two individuals together. So sometimes the time durations we are together doesn't really count as much as how much we enjoy each other. And you share all of that.
Yeah.
You share all of the way that you enjoy your time with your mother.
Yeah,
Uh,
and my dad was too. They died two months apart. And my dad was healthy, but he had a dementia diagnosis and he knew it was going to get worse. And so he died 2 months later. And that was another time when I had to learn to accept, cope, and adapt. And I'm a big believer in affirmations that if you tell yourself something enough, you believe it. Science proves that. And it just has
yeah.
to be written a certain way. So I thought with grief, I would write these grief affirmations so that I didn't have to go through the hard part. And the thing about affirmations is you have to be open to receiving that. And when somebody you love dies, you're not going to talk yourself out of that pain. You got to go through it. There's no shortcut.
Mm.
And it's just one day after another. And that year was hard for so many reasons. And I mean, it was really brutal because other things had happened also that year. And there was a song that was popular when I was younger, and there was a line in it that said, "And knowing that you would have wanted it this way, I do believe I'm feeling stronger every day." That was
Mm.
the only affirmation I could give. I could every day I would sing, knowing that you would have wanted it this way, I do believe I'm feeling stronger every day because I knew they wanted me to get through this. I knew that. But at a year, I was still not through it. I'm still, okay, look, 11 years later, I'm still not through it. I don't think you ever get over losing people you love, but I knew I had to function at a better level. And I thought, I either need to get some medication for depression or I need to do something. And what I chose to do, because it was on the anniversary of my mom's death, I went to the southernmost beach in my county and I cleared my schedule and I started walking every day, 7 to 13 miles. So I walked up the entire coast and then I think it was 59 miles. And then all the barrier islands, I either kayaked out to them so I could walk them or took boats out or ferries or whatever. So for 2 weeks, I was walking. And by day 4, I was a different person because I would wake up. It's like, oh, where am I going to be today? And I've
Mm.
done this walk multiple times now. In fact, I should probably do it. Well, it's still cool enough because it's so therapeutic. And all you do, so I wrote a book about it even. So that's this book, Work Life Reset.
Ah, yes.
And it's that is really about resetting so that you can cope with anything. Because when that walk finished, I thought to myself, boy, I wonder how long this is going to last. I feel pretty good. And it lasted. So how do you go from being that depressed to being fine in a matter of days? And it was, I made a conscious decision, and then I disengaged from everything that brought me to that sadness. And I kept moving because movement is so important for coping strategies, right? Exercise is just really important. I kept moving and I got a lot of fresh air and prayer. And by day 4, I'm a different person. And by 2 weeks, I'm better. That was a crash course in coping for me. And when I was younger, I was a cigarette smoker. I mean, I was a journalist, all of us were. And I had quit years ago when somebody I cared about a lot had cancer, and I went to chemo with her. And when I came out, I just said, Dear God, forgive me for anything I've ever done to my body. I will never smoke again. And the idea that I made it through that awful year where, I lost 2 parents. I had a friend who was just really betrayed me, and I bought a move-in ready house that my friend was the realtor for, and I got so screwed on that. I mean, it was just like $70,000 worth of unexpected expenses, and it was all boom. Every week was another, 5,000, 10,000. So all this, it was all happening, but I never smoked because I at least was functioning. I was coping and getting through that rough year. And then when I hit that year point where I said, okay, are you going to let this own you, or are you going to do something? Then I took the action and I did that beach walk, which was beautiful. It was a real gift.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
You and
Yeah.
me. So let me wrap up all of the steps that you've just described as
Okay.
the crash course for coping you mentioned. So
Yeah.
we start with the conscious decisions. So I'm hearing that we decided that we need to get out of this scenario, whatever it is.
Yes.
Then we disengage with anything that give us that negative notions, or I'm also hearing some sort of evoking the emotional connections that make us weak and become the excuse for us to maintain in that scenario.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'm not one who does much with excuses, but yeah, if somebody does, yeah, that would be a
And
good one to
then
add to it.
and then we need to move like physically, get out, get some fresh air, go to the beach at the Southern County
But
where
that's what I need to do. If you need to reset, you may need to stay home and just read books by your favorite author or
mm,
watch, you know, the Real Housewives marathon. If that's what makes you passionate and happy, whatever it is, you got to figure out how you're going to take is stop what you're doing and reboot. And now that I think about it, when I left in my van last summer, that was a reset. That totally was.
mm,
And so you disengage. But for me, my coping strategy, and that doesn't mean it's right for you. Mine always involve physical exercise because that has helped me to manage my mental health
yeah,
my entire adult life. That, I had a divorce when I was younger. It's the only time I've taken antidepressants. There's nothing wrong with taking anything like that. But I found out that I could accomplish the same thing for me with a lot of exercise. And I do a lot of exercise, probably on an average day, at least 3 hours. And that keeps me happy. And when
mm,
I don't do it, I don't feel happy. So that tells me that's a coping strategy that works for me, right? And fresh air. I'm an outdoors woman. I love fresh air, but some people may not. It's like there's no place I would less want to be for a weekend in my life than New York City because I just don't like it. It's not my bag, right? But there are people who love New York.
yeah,
So if you're somebody who loves it, go do what you love. Don't do what I love.
okay.
And just disengage and do what you love. No, and for me, and I never tell people what to believe about God. I hope people believe in something. It's none of my business. But if you do have that as a resource, use it. right? That's a place to have gratitude and get help, right? So all of that, those are the steps really, and accept, cope, adapt.
That is so cool. I also want to derail these conversations and unpack another thing that you said in Chicago that stay with me until today.
Okay.
You say something about we don't need permission to live.
To live our lives, yeah.
To live our life, yes. And I'm hearing some sort of coping mechanism in there. Well, first of all, I think that we unconsciously seek permission to live our life in some way. And when I'm thinking from that perspective, I feel that the waiting for permission is our way to excuse ourselves when we cannot cope with life.
Right. No, I think culturally some people are raised to need permission more. They have a lot of guilt. So, you look at working moms, certain marriage dynamics, that you feel like you got to ask the other person, can I go do this with my friends? Or, some of it's not about compromise, it's about control. And so that has not been my issue ever, because I never asked anybody for permission. But I have seen that again and again as a speaker dealing with people, that it's almost like they are waiting for someone to give them permission to live their lives. And it's like, you don't need permission. Do it. Do what you want to do. And now, if there are, if you've got kids, there are things you need to do to take care of those kids. It doesn't mean that just because you want to do something, you get to do it. But it means find a way to make your life work and do the things that you deserve to be fulfilled. And if you're not, you can find your fulfillment. You do not need permission to find fulfillment. You just need to figure out a path.
Can you give me an example of when people need permission to find a fulfillment? Like, how does it look like so that we can use that as
Oh, it's an everyday thing. There are people who don't want to go to college, but are told by their parents, you better go to college. And so that, they feel like they need permission to not go, right? Or there's pressure to perform. Or how many people are on the treadmill of work where they're just trying to impress others and do what they think they're supposed to be doing instead of doing what they really want to do? I mean, I like this younger generation that, they check out, they get mobile jobs, they get their own vans, and then they go travel. I mean, I want them to make a lot of money so they can pay for everybody's Social Security. We paid for the generation before us. We want to collect. But that is not waiting for permission, what they're doing. They are saying, this is how I'm going to live. This is not traditional, and I'm willing to do that. So I think every day we are faced with opportunities to either toe the line or do it our own way. And I just say, just do what calls you.
That's so cool. So in a way, we really have free will to live our lives and really enjoying it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I also want to touch on your latest book, Coming Back, quite quickly. So
Okay.
I'm listening to some of your video as part of your book launch, and again, there is this other thing that stick out for me. One thing that keep me on my toes when I listen to some of your audio is that it doesn't matter that the person is good on the job today, but it's also have to constantly upskill ourselves to prepare for tomorrow. So my question to you around this is this our new way to cope so that we can be better in the workforce?
Yeah, there is no avoiding that. And like, I'm a good example of this. You got people who dive into change and people who don't. And I've reached a point now where, I mean, AI is scary, right? I mean, that is scary. But also, it's kind of repulsive to me that you put something in there and it writes it for you, and everybody thinks, isn't this wonderful? And I think, as somebody who has been a writer my entire life, I'm not kidding, I was putting out newspapers in elementary school. I've got them. I really was. And had so much joy from writing. And to see people thinking, oh, I don't have to do that. I can just ask this thing to write it for me. That makes me sad that they're doing that. Now, if I were adaptive, I would say, oh, isn't this great? How am I going to use it? And it's like, I feel bad that there will be, it's my dog, be generations of people who are going to miss this great joy. But in the workplace, everything is changing so rapidly, and we don't have the luxury of sitting out technology because it's going to keep changing. And employers, they don't care if you're the best person for the job when they're going to hire or when they're going to keep somebody. They don't care if you're the best person for the job today. They want to know you're going to be the best person 5 years down and 10 years down. And that means you have to demonstrate that you're insatiably curious, that you're learning on your own, that everything that is coming is something you're going to anticipate because you're not waiting for the company to teach that you're learning it on your own. So that's a way of coping. You take classes online and you study trends in your industry on your own, and that's how you can cope with change, is to become somebody who's an early adapter. And I think I was pretty early adapting a lot of things, but it's like the AI thing with the writing. Ooh, that just makes me so mad. And I have a podcast, and my podcast partner, she's all in on it. She loves that. But her daughter is a singer-songwriter, and she just, she's all proud of her daughter. And I said, AI is going to be able to write and perform songs better than she is. And then there's this dead silence. So I think it's when it hits home that people realize that we have to really pay attention to what's going on.
Thank you for that. The other thing I've noticed on your website and your stories up there is how you start your introductory on your website with, I think, the most humane sentence I could have seen. I had a bully boss. Is there any backstory that you can share with us? And
oh yeah, but we should tell people, since you've referenced my website, where it is if they want to get it, and that's fawngermer.com. So yeah, I had a bully boss, but I frequently just refer to him as my boss hole. And I had a very good career as a journalist. Like I said, I was making newspapers in elementary school. It was the only thing I had wanted to do. I was an investigative reporter, did very well. And then I got the boss hole. I also used to call him the tormentor because he was the opposite of a mentor. And he was a jerk. I mean, he just did not like people who were strong and talented. So these are two examples. What he said to me is the same thing he said to the guy who sat across from me. And he said to me, you think you're going to be a columnist? You're never going to be a columnist. You're never going to be more than you are right now, a reporter. And I took the typically female approach and for 2 years tried to work really hard to get his attention and get on the good list again, which never happened. The guy across from me that he said it to said, well, screw you, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to the LA Times and win the Pulitzer Prize, and then I'm going to write a memoir about my life, which is going to be a New York Times bestseller called The Tender Bar, which was also a movie that was out a couple of years ago with Ben Affleck in it and produced by George Clooney. And he wrote the autobiography for Andre Agassi, which was a New York Times bestseller. Well, I'm not novel, autobiography. Yeah, he's a ghostwriter, so it's an autobiography. Then he wrote Phil Knight's autobiography. And last year, this is the guy that wrote Prince Harry's book, Spare, right?
Wow, okay.
This is a guy that the boss hole said was never going to be more than working as a reporter at the Rocky Mountain News in Denver. And so, yeah, you have to learn to cope with that. And it took me 2 years to think, gosh, what a jerk. He's the problem, not me. JR knew it immediately and left. But that's a lesson for all of us, because we don't always have to take what other people tell us and believe it. And I certainly don't do that anymore. I learned from that. But the good that came of it is that if I had not gone through that, I wouldn't have known what I needed to know in order to do the kind of work that I've done as an author and speaker, which is really leadership with strong emphasis on women's leadership. I speak to everybody, but everybody's had a boss hole. Everybody. And everybody's had a rough time where they lose their confidence. And so, he gave me some tools that I was able to then exploit and make a lot of money because of it.
So if we can go back to that 2 years period, was there a trigger that helped you to realize that this wasn't your fault? It's just the different in viewpoint.
Oh, God, yes. Talk about a defining moment was
Yeah.
I worked so hard that the city editor promoted me to be the night city editor. And I thought, wow, I got out of that hole. And they, there used to be these things people would read. They were called newspapers, right? And so I was working at this newspaper, and you would have at like about 4 in the afternoon the night news meeting. And so I went for my first night news meeting because then we would talk about what the main stories of the day were, what we were planning for the front page, and I would have to change it if big news happened. But that's an important meeting. And the first night news meeting where I go in as night city editor, the the boss hole happened to be in attendance, and he was by this point he was the editor of the paper
Mm.
and the big guy. And he's in that meeting, and the city editor says Fawn's the new night city editor, and he goes, "Oh no, there's no promotion. She's just a reporter." And this is in front of all the editors. So there were at least a dozen people in there that saw. I mean, it was humiliating. She's just a reporter. So I got up and I walked to my desk and I picked up the phone and called the editor of the Tampa Tribune, which the guy had been trying to recruit me for 4 years. And I said, "I would like to go there, but if you're going to hire me, you have to do it right now." And he says, "Let me call you tomorrow." And the next day he called me with a really good offer. And then I had to think very hard because it was going to bring me back to Florida so I could be near my family, which was important to me. But I had a job in Denver, which I loved Colorado. I had a ton of friends. I had a union protected job, so I could never be fired by that
Yeah.
guy, right? And I made good money. So I was like, I was thinking, do I want to go? And my friend said to me, "Don't let security be your dangerous anchor." And then she said it again, "Don't let security be your dangerous anchor." And she said it 3 times. Don't let security be your dangerous anchor. So I went and I left, and I went into management at the Tampa Tribune. Not my best fit because I was this hard charging reporter, and I should have known how to win friends and influence people. So it was a little rough, and I went looking for a book telling me how to be effective as a strong woman in a very male dominated environment, and there wasn't anything. And then that led me on my path, right?
Mm.
But for all the people who stayed back in Denver in their union protected jobs, working for a jerk who would yell at them and make them feel this big, they thought they had security because they had union protected jobs. And that newspaper went out of business.
Wow. Okay.
And so if I had done what I thought was secure and stayed put, I would have been without a new career and a new job, and I would have been like everybody else, drowning. And instead, I get to be a best-selling author and go all over the world and talk to people and meet people like you. And that came out of an experience where I felt this big, and so I guess success is the best revenge.
I really appreciate you retelling that stories and share it with us. We're getting to the end of the episode soon. What's next for you in the coming 12 months?
Well, I finished my 10th book, so that's going to come out. And I got some speaking I'm still doing, and I'm going to do a lot of hiking and
Nice.
kayaking, and that's it. I mean, the next 12 months, I'm going to live, live, live.
Would you like to give a quick spiel about your next book?
Yeah, I don't have the title yet. We keep arguing about that, so I'm not sure what it's called, but it's about what we were talking about. Don't wait. It's about living now, realizing that that you've got the power to reset and go out there and live your life. It's really about me heading cross country with my dog. And it starts out saying that I never hiked the Pacific Crest Trail or climbed Mount Everest, and I didn't eat, pray, love my way around the world. But what I did, all I did was go for a long ride with my dog.
Nice.
And it's most people would think it's not remarkable, but it was. And so I learned so much, and that's what I'm sharing.
I appreciate that. I'll watch out for it. We're getting to the last question of the episode.
Okay.
Hopefully you have fun with this one. So think about all of your stories and your journey from the beginning to where you are today. What is the one thing that you love the most about yourself in that journey?
That I didn't waste any time. That I always was active and adventurous, and but especially when my mom got sick, I was, and after that, it was like going to the races. I do not waste time. I think there's a way to make every day unique. Even
Mm.
if you're just going out to watch the sunset, it sets everywhere, right? There's always something beautiful in every day. And so the thing I love about myself is that I search for that and almost always find it.
Thank you so much. This is the end of the episode. Thank you again for your time.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer, and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity.